David Miller woke up before the sun. His small alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning, echoing inside the one-bedroom apartment he shared with his daughter. The apartment was old, the paint peeling in some corners, but to David it was more than just four walls. It was the little world where he and his 10-year-old daughter, Emily, lived together after his wife had passed away years earlier. David stretched his tired arms and rubbed his eyes. His back hurt from the long shifts of mopping floors, carrying trash, and cleaning restrooms. He was a janitor at a large technology company called Bright Tech Solutions, a place filled with tall glass walls, expensive computers, and people in expensive suits who often walked past him as if he didn't exist. Yet to David, the job was everything. It was what kept food on the table, what bought Emily's school books, and what paid the rent each month. He had promised himself long ago that no matter how hard life became, he would never let Emily feel she was alone. "Daddy, are you leaving already?" a soft voice called from the bed as he packed his small lunchbox. Emily sat up, her messy hair covering half her face. She was wearing her faded pajamas, hugging her favorite stuffed bear. David walked over, kissed her forehead, and whispered gently, "Go back to sleep, sweetheart. I'll be back before dinner. Don't forget you've got math homework today." Emily smiled sleepily. "Okay, Daddy, love you." "Love you more," David replied, though his voice cracked a little. He hated leaving her alone so early, but he had no choice. By 5:30 a.m., David was already inside the Bright Tech building. The lobby sparkled with marble floors and giant digital screens showing stock prices and company news. The place smelled of money and power, but none of it belonged to him. He wore a plain uniform with his name stitched on the chest, David. He carried a mop, not a briefcase. He worked silently most mornings, cleaning hallways before the executives arrived. He learned to move like a shadow, unseen, almost invisible, but though his hands scrubbed floors, his mind was always elsewhere. He had once dreamed of being an engineer. In college, before life's storm struck, he loved numbers, equations, and problems no one else could solve. But those dreams had died when his wife became sick, and he dropped out of school to take care of her. Now, his world was reduced to buckets of soapy water, long hours, and the hope that his daughter would one day have the chance to chase the dreams he couldn't. One morning, as he mopped outside the glass-walled conference room, he overheard raised voices. Inside, a group of executives were arguing around a long table, their laptops glowing. David couldn't help but listen. "This is a disaster," one of them shouted. "If we don't solve this algorithm issue, we're going to lose the $100 million contract with Orion Systems. Do you understand what that means?" David froze. He didn't mean to listen, but the words echoed in his head. He heard another voice, calmer but worried. "We've had our best teams on it for weeks. Nothing works. The system keeps crashing. If this continues, we lose not just money, but reputation." David quietly moved away, pretending to mop. He didn't want trouble. Still, the words stayed with him all day. He thought about the algorithm, the crashing system, and the desperate executives. That night, after Emily went to sleep, David sat at their small kitchen table with a pencil and a few sheets of paper. He couldn't stop himself. He didn't know all the details, but he understood enough from what he had overheard. He scribbled numbers, equations, and patterns. His mind, though rusty from years of disuse, still worked like it once did. Hours passed. His hands grew tired, but his eyes lit up with a spark he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, David carried his mop through the halls again. The executives were rushing into the conference room, their faces tense. As he passed by, one of the junior staff members dropped a folder full of papers. David quickly bent down, helped pick them up, and caught a glimpse of diagrams and codes. It was exactly what he had been thinking about. "Thanks," the young man said quickly, grabbing the papers back. He didn't look twice at David. David wanted to say something, but he didn't. Who would listen to a janitor? Still, he couldn't let it go. By the end of the week, he had filled an entire notebook with ideas. The solution, at least in his eyes, was simple. So simple he wondered how no one else had seen it. That Friday evening, as he was emptying trash cans near the CEO's office, he found the door slightly open. Inside sat Michael Adams, the CEO of Bright Tech, a tall man in his late 50s with silver hair and tired eyes. He was staring at his computer screen, frustrated, muttering under his breath. Papers were scattered across his desk. David hesitated. His heart pounded. He knew this was crazy. He was just a janitor, yet something inside him whispered, if not now, then never. He knocked gently. "Excuse me, sir," David said softly. Michael looked up, surprised. "Yes, do you need something?" David swallowed hard. I overheard some of the problem about the system crash. I think I might have an idea." The CEO blinked, confused. Then, almost amused, he leaned back. You think you can solve what my engineers have been struggling with for weeks?" David's hands trembled, but he nodded. "Yes, sir. If you just give me a chance, I can show you." There was silence in the room. Michael stared at him, measuring the janitor who stood nervously holding a mop. For a moment, it seemed like he would dismiss him, but then maybe out of exhaustion or curiosity, he gestured to the chair. "All right," the CEO said slowly. "You've got 5 minutes. Show me what you've got." David's heart raced. He stepped inside, laid down his worn-out notebook, and began explaining with simple words, his hands moving quickly across the page. Within minutes, he outlined a solution so clear, so direct, that Michael's eyes widened. This can't be real," the CEO whispered, leaning closer. He typed the formula into his computer, adjusted the code, and pressed enter. For a few tense seconds, the screen flickered. Then suddenly the system stabilized. No crashes. Everything ran smoothly. Michael sat back, stunned. David's chest rose and fell as he clutched his mop. "I told you it was simple, sir." The CEO looked at him in silence, his mouth slightly open. He had just watched a janitor fix a $100 million problem in seconds. For the first time, David wasn't invisible. Michael Adams, the CEO of Brightech, sat frozen in his chair, staring at the screen as if he had just seen a miracle. The system that had caused weeks of chaos, the very problem that threatened a $100 million contract, was now running perfectly, and the man who solved it was not an engineer, not a consultant, not a highly paid expert, but a janitor in a worn-out uniform holding a mop. For a long moment, silence filled the room. David Miller shifted uncomfortably, unsure if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He lowered his eyes, ready for the CEO to dismiss him, but instead Michael leaned forward. His voice was low but steady. "How did you know this?" David swallowed. "I studied engineering years ago, sir. I had to leave college when my wife got sick. Since then, I've just been working to take care of my daughter. But numbers, patterns, they've always stayed in my head. When I overheard the problem, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I only wanted to help." Michael's sharp eyes softened for a moment. He saw not just a janitor, but a man who carried pain, responsibility, and hidden brilliance. "You realize what you just did?" Michael said finally. David gave a small shrug. "I just fixed something broken, sir. That's my job, isn't it?" The CEO almost smiled. He picked up the phone on his desk. "Send in the senior engineers now." Within minutes, 3 engineers and a director rushed into the office, confused about the urgent call. They glanced at David but paid him little attention, assuming he was just there to clean. Michael pointed at the screen. "Look at this." The engineers leaned over, typing rapidly, checking the logs. One by one, their faces changed from doubt to shock. "It's stable. It's really stable," one whispered. "This solves the problem." "Who did this?" another asked, staring at the code. Michael leaned back in his chair, his eyes shifting toward David. "He did." The room went silent. The engineers turned and looked at the janitor in disbelief. David shifted his weight nervously, clutching his mop handle tighter. "You've got to be kidding," one muttered under his breath. But Michael's voice was firm. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The engineers exchanged uneasy glances. They had been working day and night on this problem, and yet a janitor had solved it in minutes. Pride and confusion mixed in the room, but there was no denying the truth on the screen. Michael stood. "Gentlemen, cancel the crisis meeting with Orion Systems. The issue is resolved. And before you leave, I want you to remember something. Talent does not wear a suit. Talent can be found anywhere." The engineers left, still stunned, while Michael remained with David. "You've just saved this company from a disaster," Michael said quietly. "Do you understand the scale of what you've done? People will talk about this for years." David lowered his gaze. "I didn't do it for recognition, sir. I need this job. I need to provide for my daughter. That's all." Michael studied him carefully. Then he asked, "What's your daughter's name?" "Emily," David replied softly, his face lighting up at the sound of her name. The CEO nodded slowly. He could see the love and weight in David's eyes. This wasn't just a man with intelligence, it was a father with unshakable devotion. That evening, David walked home with heavy steps. He wondered if he had crossed a line by stepping into the CEO's office. What if they thought he was arrogant? What if they fired him for interfering? When he opened the apartment door, Emily ran to him. "Daddy!" she cried, hugging his leg. David smiled tiredly, lifting her into his arms. "Hey, sweetheart. How was school?" "It was good. I got a star on my spelling test." She beamed. "That's my girl," David whispered, kissing her cheek. As they sat down to dinner, simple pasta with tomato sauce, Emily noticed her father was quiet. "Daddy, are you okay?" David forced a smile. "I'm fine, Emmy, just a long day at work." But inside, he was wrestling with doubt. The next morning, as David pushed his cleaning cart through the lobby, something unusual happened. People were looking at him. Some whispered. A few even nodded respectfully. For years, he had been invisible, but suddenly it felt like the spotlight was on him. Then around noon, his supervisor, Mr. Collins, approached him. "David, the CEO wants to see you in his office now." David's heart pounded. He followed nervously, expecting the worst. Inside the CEO's office, Michael stood waiting with a calm but serious expression. On the desk lay a folder with papers neatly arranged. "David," Michael began, "I've been thinking about what you did. You could have kept silent. You could have just gone home and ignored what you heard, but you didn't. You cared enough to act even when it wasn't your responsibility." David lowered his head. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble, sir. Michael raised a hand. "Stop, you didn't cause trouble. You saved this company." David blinked, unsure how to respond. Michael opened the folder and pushed it across the desk. Inside was a formal letter with Bright-Tech's logo. "This," Michael explained, "is an offer. I want you to join the engineering team. Not as a janitor, but as a problem solver. We'll provide training, mentorship, and resources. You have talent, David. Talent this company needs." David's hands shook as he looked at the letter. It felt like a dream. After years of mopping floors, after years of struggle, here was a chance to return to the path he once loved. But then, he thought of Emily. He thought of stability, the steady paycheck, the simple but safe life they had built. What if he failed? What if this new role demanded too much and left Emily alone? Michael noticed his hesitation. "I know it's a big change. You don't have to decide right away. But think about this, David. Think about the example you'll set for your daughter. She'll see her father not only working hard but also believing in himself." David's throat tightened. The words touched something deep inside him. He left the office in silence, the letter clutched in his hands. That night he sat with Emily on the couch, reading her a bedtime story. She noticed the letter in his pocket. "What's that, Daddy?" she asked curiously. David smiled softly, brushing her hair back. It's something that might change our lives, Emmy. Something good." She tilted her head, innocent and hopeful. "Will it make you smile more?" David's eyes grew wet. He hugged her tightly. "Yes, sweetheart. I think it will." As he lay in bed later that night staring at the ceiling, David knew the decision ahead was not just about a job. It was about his future, his daughter's future, and the chance to finally step into the light after years of shadows. The janitor had solved a $100 million problem, but now he faced a question far greater. Was he ready to believe in himself again? David Miller couldn't sleep that night. The letter from Bright-Tech lay on the table beside his bed, its official logo shining faintly in the light of the lamp. His mind kept circling around the same questions. Should I take this? Can I handle it? What if I fail? What if Emily suffers? He turned and looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully in the small bed across the room. Her tiny breaths were steady, her stuffed bear tucked under her chin. David thought of all the sacrifices he had made just to keep her safe, to make sure she never went hungry. The janitor's job, though simple, had given him stability. But the offer from the CEO wasn't just about money. It was about a chance to return to the world he once loved, the world of ideas, numbers, and solutions. Yet fear pulled him back. He had left school so many years ago. What if he wasn't good enough anymore? What if the engineers laughed at him, mocked him, or worse, set him up to fail? Morning came, but the questions remained. As David dressed in his uniform and prepared Emily's breakfast, she noticed the worry in his eyes. "Daddy, you look sad," Emily said softly, eating her toast. David forced a smile. Not sad, sweetheart, just thinking a lot. About the letter? She asked curiously. David paused, then nodded. Yes, it's a big decision, Emmy. If I take this job, things will change. It will be harder. I'll have to learn again, but it could also give us a better life. Emily tilted her head and asked the simplest question. Daddy, do you want it? David froze. No one had asked him that directly. He had been thinking of safety, stability, and risk, but deep down the truth was clear. Yes. He wanted it. His heart longed for the chance to use his mind again, to feel alive in ways a mop and bucket never could. I think I do, he admitted quietly. Then you should take it, Emily said, her voice steady in a way that surprised him. You always tell me to be brave at school. You should be brave too. Her words sank deep into his heart. Out of the mouths of children sometimes came the purest wisdom. That day, David carried the letter back to Bright Tech. The lobby felt different now. People who once ignored him gave small nods of respect. Whispers followed him, though he pretended not to hear. That's him, someone said. The janitor who fixed the system. When he stepped into the CEO's office, Michael Adams greeted him with a firm handshake. Have you made your decision? David took a deep breath. Yes, sir. I'll accept the offer. A smile spread across Michael's face. Good. You've made the right choice, David. We'll arrange everything, training, mentorship, and a new schedule. It won't be easy, but I believe in you. For the first time in years, David felt a spark of hope. His first week in the engineering department was both exciting and terrifying. He no longer wore the janitor's uniform, but a simple shirt and tie provided by the company. Still, when he walked into the office, he felt the stares. Some were curious, others doubtful, a few openly annoyed. One engineer, a man named Robert, muttered under his breath, "So now janitors get promotions? What's next?" David heard him but stayed quiet. He knew he had to prove himself, not with words, but with work. Michael assigned a senior engineer, Sarah Johnson, to mentor David. Sarah was in her 40s, sharp-minded, and respected by the entire team. Unlike others, she didn't dismiss him. Instead, she handed him a stack of manuals. Start with these, she said kindly. You'll need to refresh your basics before we go deeper. Don't worry, I'll guide you. David nodded gratefully. He spent every spare moment studying, during lunch breaks, late at night after Emily went to bed, and even on weekends. His mind, though rusty at first, soon regained its old rhythm. Equations, patterns, and systems started making sense again. One evening, Emily walked into the living room to find her father surrounded by books and papers. Daddy, you're doing homework like me, she giggled. David laughed softly. Yes, sweetheart. Daddy has homework too now. Are you going to get a star like me? She asked innocently. He hugged her. I hope so, Emmy. I really hope so. By the third week, David began contributing to small projects. Sarah noticed his unique way of thinking. Unlike most engineers who often overcomplicated problems, David searched for simple, practical solutions. His years as a janitor had taught him to see problems differently, directly without unnecessary layers. One afternoon, the team faced a minor system bug that had been delaying their work for 2 days. Engineers argued about complex coding solutions. David listened quietly, then spoke up. Excuse me, he said carefully. But what if we try resetting the sequence instead of rewriting the code? It might save time. At first, some scoffed, but Sarah encouraged him. Go ahead, David, show us. David walked to the whiteboard, sketched his idea, and explained it step by step. Within an hour, they applied the method and the bug was gone. The room fell silent. Even Robert, who had mocked him earlier, stared at the screen in disbelief. That's actually brilliant, one engineer admitted. Sarah smiled. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. David felt a quiet pride rise in his chest. For once, he wasn't invisible. Still, challenges remained. Balancing his new role with fatherhood was not easy. Some nights, Emily sat alone doing her homework while David pored over technical manuals. Guilt gnawed at him, but Emily always encouraged him. It's okay, Daddy, she would say. You're working hard for both of us. I'm proud of you. Her words gave him strength to keep going. By the end of the first month, whispers in the company had changed. No longer was David just the janitor. He was becoming known as the man who sees what others miss. One Friday afternoon, Michael called him back to the office. David, the CEO said warmly, I've been watching your progress. You've done more than just prove yourself. You've inspired this entire company. People are working harder, thinking differently because they see what you've achieved. David's eyes widened. I don't know what to say, sir. Say nothing, Michael replied. Just keep going. Your journey is only beginning. As David walked out of the office, his heart swelled with a feeling he hadn't known in years. Hope. Not just for himself, but for Emily. For the first time, he began to believe that maybe their future would be brighter than he ever imagined. David Miller had been part of Brighttech's engineering department for 2 months now. In that short time, he had gone from being the janitor with a lucky idea to someone whose opinion was slowly beginning to matter. Yet not everyone welcomed him. Respect came in whispers, not applause. Some admired him, but others carried jealousy in their hearts. At first, David ignored it. He had always been used to silence, to being invisible. But this time, things were different. He was no longer mopping floors. He was solving problems that influenced millions of dollars. That change did not sit well with everyone, especially with Robert, the senior engineer who had mocked him on his first day. One Monday morning, the team gathered in the conference room. Michael Adams, the CEO, announced a new project with pride in his voice. Orion Systems has extended their partnership, Michael said, but they've also asked us to develop a new data security framework. It's one of the most complex challenges we've faced. If we succeed, it could bring Brighttech an additional $200 million in contracts. If we fail, we risk everything we've built. The room buzzed with tension. Michael's eyes moved across the team. This will require every ounce of creativity, discipline, and teamwork. Sarah will lead, but I want everyone bringing their best. David sat quietly, scribbling notes. He knew this was his chance to show he was more than a one-time miracle. Over the next few weeks, the team worked long hours. Whiteboards filled with equations, codes, and strategies. David often stayed late, his mind pushing through fatigue as he tried to balance work with fatherhood. He would return home, tuck Emily into bed, and then return to his books long past midnight. "Daddy, you're tired," Emily would whisper, her eyes full of concern. "I'm okay, sweetheart," David replied with a smile. "This is our chance. I have to give it everything." But not everyone was happy with David's presence. Robert, frustrated by the growing respect David was earning, started planting seeds of doubt. "He just got lucky once," Robert muttered to a colleague during lunch. "Anyone can stumble on a simple fix. But this project? This is real engineering. He'll fail, and when he does, everyone will see what a mistake it was to bring him here." Those words spread quietly through the team. Some began to agree. Others stayed silent. David, though aware of the whispers, kept his focus on the work. He wasn't here to prove Robert wrong. He was here to prove himself right. One evening, while reviewing the project data, Sarah noticed a pattern in David's notes. "David, where did you get this idea?" she asked. He hesitated. "It just came to me. I've been thinking about how systems fail when people overcomplicate them. What if we focus on simplifying instead of adding more layers?" Sarah studied the idea carefully. It was unusual, almost too simple, but something about it made sense. "This could work," she admitted. Word spread quickly to Michael, who called for a demonstration. The next morning, the entire team gathered. David stood nervously in front of the whiteboard, his hands trembling slightly. He explained his approach, breaking it down step by step. His voice wasn't polished like the others, but it carried sincerity and clarity. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then Robert chuckled. "That's it? That's your big idea? You think a problem worth $200 million can be solved with such a basic plan? This is child's play." David lowered his eyes, embarrassed. Doubt flooded the room again. But before anyone could speak, Sarah stepped forward. "Actually, I think David is onto something. Sometimes the hardest problems have the simplest answers. We should at least test it." Michael nodded firmly. "I agree. Run the test." Reluctantly, the team applied David's method to a small section of the system. To their shock, the results were promising. The framework held strong, more stable than any of the complex models they had been trying. Excitement filled the room, except for Robert, whose face burned with frustration. But the real test was still ahead. Orion Systems had requested a live demonstration in 2 weeks. If the framework failed during the test, the contract would collapse and Brighttech's reputation would take a hit. David felt the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. At home, Emily noticed his silence. "Daddy, you're worried again," she said one night as they shared a simple dinner. David sighed. It's a big project, Emmy. If I fail, a lot of people will be disappointed. Emily reached across the table and held his hand. But if you don't try, you'll never know. You told me once that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you try anyway. Her words once again lit a fire in him. The day of the demonstration arrived. Orion's representatives sat in the large conference hall, their eyes sharp and calculating. Brighttech's entire executive board was present. The atmosphere was tense, every breath heavy with expectation. David stood near the back, his notes clutched tightly in his hand. Sarah led the presentation, but when it came time to explain the new framework, she called David forward. This design, she said firmly, was David's idea. He should be the one to present it. David's heart pounded. He walked slowly to the front, feeling dozens of eyes on him. Some skeptical, some curious. He took a deep breath and began. His voice shook at first, but as he explained the framework, his confidence grew. He spoke with passion, with clarity, with the honesty of a man who had spent nights balancing equations at his kitchen table, while his daughter slept in the next room. Finally, the system was activated. Seconds passed, then minutes. The framework held steady. No glitches. No crashes. The system performed beyond expectations. Applause broke out across the room. Orion's representatives nodded, impressed. Michael's face lit with pride. But no applause meant more to David than the thought of his daughter smiling at home, knowing her father had faced his fears and stood tall. After the meeting, Michael pulled David aside. Do you realize what you've just done? You didn't just help us win a contract, you showed everyone that brilliance can come from anywhere. You've inspired this company more than I could ever have imagined. David felt his throat tighten. He thought of Emily, of long nights and struggles, of every moment he had doubted himself. And yet here he was. But as he left the room, he caught Robert's glare. The jealousy in his colleague's eyes was unmistakable. David knew his journey was far from over. Success had earned him respect, but it had also made him a target. And somewhere deep down, he sensed that the biggest challenge of his life was still waiting. David Miller's name was no longer whispered in the hallways of Brighttech. It was spoken aloud. After his success in the Orion Systems project, employees looked at him differently. Some greeted him with respect, others with admiration. But while many celebrated his rise, not everyone felt the same. Among those who watched with growing resentment was Robert. For years, Robert had built his reputation as one of the company's most talented engineers. He had worked hard, climbed steadily, and earned the trust of his peers. But now, in just a few short months, a former janitor was stealing the spotlight. Robert's pride burned every time he saw David at meetings. Every time someone mentioned the janitor who saved Brighttech, it felt like a shadow over everything Robert had accomplished. One morning, as David arrived early to the office, he found Robert waiting by the entrance. You enjoying the attention? Robert asked sharply, his voice low. David blinked, surprised. I'm just doing my job. Your job? Robert scoffed. Let's be honest, you're out of your league. You got lucky twice, but luck doesn't last forever. When you fall, it's going to be hard. David didn't answer. He had learned long ago that arguments proved nothing. He simply nodded and walked past, though the words stung. At home that evening, Emily noticed her father's heavy mood. Daddy, did something happen? She asked while they prepared dinner together. David hesitated. He didn't want to burden her with workplace conflicts, but Emily was too observant. Some people at work don't believe I belong there, he admitted softly. Emily frowned. But you do belong there. You solved big problems. You help people. Isn't that what matters? David smiled faintly. It should. But not everyone sees it that way. She squeezed his hand. Then keep showing them, Daddy. Show them every day until they can't deny it anymore. Her words filled him with quiet strength. The following week, a new challenge arrived. Brighttech was preparing for an important partnership with a government agency. The project required flawless performance, and Michael assigned both Sarah and Robert to lead the effort, with David included on the team. From the beginning, the atmosphere was tense. Robert often dismissed David's ideas in meetings, cutting him off before he could finish. We don't need shortcuts, Robert said one afternoon. We need real engineering. Leave this to the experts. Sarah tried to mediate, reminding everyone that teamwork was essential, but David could feel the walls of resistance tightening around him. He worked harder than ever, staying late after everyone left, scribbling ideas in his worn notebook, testing small pieces of code when the office was quiet. He wasn't trying to outshine anyone. He only wanted the project to succeed, for the company, for his daughter, and for himself. One night near midnight, David discovered something unusual while reviewing the system's data. A small error in the framework was causing instability. It wasn't obvious, but if ignored, it could cause the entire system to crash during the government presentation. The next morning, he rushed to the meeting room. "I found something," he announced, placing his notes on the table. Robert rolled his eyes. "Here we go again," but Sarah leaned forward. "What did you find, David?" David explained the error carefully, showing the numbers and patterns. Sarah's eyes widened. She understood the seriousness. "This could ruin everything," she said. "We need to fix it," Robert frowned. "No, he's exaggerating. We've already tested the system. It's fine. We don't have time to chase every little concern." The room grew tense. Sarah and Robert argued while David stayed quiet, unsure if he should press further. Finally, Michael entered and asked what was happening. Sarah explained quickly. Robert shook his head. "It's nothing, sir. Just paranoia." Michael turned to David. "Are you certain about this?" David took a breath. "Yes, sir. If we don't fix it, the system will fail during the presentation." Michael studied his face, then said firmly, "Fix it." Robert's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Over the next few days, David worked side by side with Sarah, adjusting the framework, running tests, and double-checking every sequence. Robert, though clearly frustrated, could not deny the results. The system became stronger, smoother, more reliable than before. On the day of the presentation, everything worked flawlessly. The government officials were impressed, praising Bright-Tech's efficiency and innovation. The contract was secured, worth millions, and the company celebrated. Michael congratulated the team, but his words carried special weight when he turned to David. "Once again, you've proven your worth." Applause followed. But David only thought of Emily's face when he told her the news later that evening. "Daddy, that's amazing," she shouted, hugging him tightly. "See, I told you to keep showing them." David laughed, his heart swelling with pride, but not everyone was celebrating. That night, as most employees went home, Robert sat in his office, anger boiling inside him. He felt overshadowed, dismissed, humiliated. To him, David wasn't a hero, he was a threat, and in that moment, Robert made a silent vow. He would find a way to expose David, to prove once and for all that the janitor didn't belong among them. The next week, small rumors began to spread. People whispered that David wasn't truly the one solving the problems, that maybe Sarah or even Michael himself had been feeding him answers. Some claimed he was using old tricks instead of real knowledge. David noticed the change in the way people looked at him. The respect was still there, but mixed with suspicion. One afternoon, as he sat at his desk, Sarah approached. "Ignore the noise," she said firmly. "People talk when they're afraid. Don't let it break you." David nodded, but the whispers still weighed on him. He thought of Emily, of how she looked at him like a hero. He couldn't let her down. That night, as he tucked her into bed, Emily asked, "Why do you look worried again?" David smiled softly. "Because sometimes, even when you do good, not everyone believes in you." She held his hand. "Then believe in yourself, Daddy. That's enough." Her words carried him through the darkness. In the weeks that followed, David worked harder than ever. But he knew Robert was not finished. He could feel the tension, the quiet hostility, the storm building in the background. And though David didn't yet know it, Robert's next move would not only test his career, but his strength as a father and as a man who had already fought so many battles. The office felt heavier than usual that Monday morning. David Miller walked past familiar desks, noticing the quiet glances, the hushed whispers. He knew Robert's anger had not faded. If anything, it had grown sharper, more determined. David took a deep breath. He reminded himself that he had come too far to be intimidated. He thought of Emily waiting at home, her innocent faith in him stronger than any fear he might feel. He tightened his grip on his notebook, ready for whatever lay ahead. Robert had spent the weekend preparing. He had meticulously reviewed David's work on the government framework, searching for flaws. He believed that even the smallest mistake would be enough to humiliate David publicly. By mid-morning, Robert had found a small discrepancy in a minor calculation. Though it would have little effect on the overall system, he planned to exaggerate it during the next team meeting. When the meeting began, the tension was almost tangible. Michael Adams sat at the head of the table, his expression calm but alert. Engineers filed in, some curious, others apprehensive. David took his usual seat, heart pounding. Robert cleared his throat and began, "I've been reviewing the framework thoroughly, and I believe there is a significant flaw in David's section of the code. If left uncorrected, it could cause serious failures in the live system." The room went silent. Eyes turned to David, whispers spread. Some looked concerned, others skeptical. David felt a chill, but he stood tall. "I appreciate your concern, Robert," he said calmly. "Would you please show me exactly where you think the problem is?" Robert smirked and projected his findings onto the screen. "Here, this line could miscalculate under certain conditions. Any competent engineer would see the risk immediately." David studied the projection carefully. He nodded slowly. "I see what you mean. But let's run a quick test to understand the impact." He typed commands into the system, adjusting variables, monitoring results. The discrepancy Robert pointed out produced a tiny error, so small it would have been insignificant in real-world use. David turned to the team. "The issue exists mathematically, yes, but functionally, it does not affect the system's performance at all. The framework remains fully stable and reliable." There was a moment of silence. Then Sarah spoke. "He's right. I've run similar tests and the framework is completely stable. Robert, your observation is accurate mathematically but irrelevant practically. We should move forward." Robert's face darkened, but he had no evidence beyond what David had just demonstrated. He knew the room would see his attempt to discredit David for what it was, jealousy and fear, not fact. Michael finally leaned forward. "David, well done. You handled this professionally and clearly. This is exactly why we trusted you with this project." David exhaled, feeling the weight lift slightly. He had faced the challenge not with anger, but with knowledge and calmness. After the meeting, David returned to his desk. He felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Sarah approached him quietly. "You were amazing today," she said softly. "Robert tried to undermine you, but you handled it with integrity. That's what sets you apart." David smiled, though weariness shadowed his eyes. "Thank you, Sarah. It wasn't easy, but I couldn't let doubt control me." "Not for me, and not for Emily," Sarah nodded knowingly. "Remember that. Your strength isn't just in your mind, it's in your heart and your character. People notice that even when they try to hide it." That evening, David returned home to Emily. She ran to him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, did you win?" David laughed softly, lifting her into his arms. "Yes, Emmy, today was hard, but we did it. Everything is working perfectly." Emily hugged him tightly. "I knew you could do it. You're my hero." Her words filled David with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about recognition in the office or whispers in the hallways. It was about the trust, love, and pride he shared with his daughter. The next week, Michael Adams called a company-wide meeting. The entire engineering team gathered in the main hall, murmurs of anticipation filling the room. Michael stepped forward and addressed the staff. "I want to take a moment to recognize someone who has changed the way we think, the way we work, and the way we see talent in this company. David Miller joined us not long ago, and in a short time he has solved major problems, inspired colleagues, and reminded us all that brilliance can come from anywhere." Applause erupted. David sat quietly, his heart racing. He never sought this attention, but he felt gratitude for the recognition. Michael continued, "David has proven that dedication, integrity, and courage are more important than titles or past positions. Today I am officially promoting him to lead problem solver. He will continue to guide critical projects, mentor colleagues, and help Bright Tech grow stronger every day." The room erupted in cheers. Even some of the skeptical employees clapped enthusiastically. David looked over at Robert, who avoided his gaze, clearly realizing that envy had cost him the chance to build bridges. David's hands shook slightly as he stood. He felt proud, not for himself alone, but for Emily, for every sacrifice he had made, for every hour spent studying, learning, and persevering. That evening, David walked home slowly, savoring the moment. He opened the apartment door and Emily ran to him. "You did it, Daddy," she shouted. "You're the best!" David laughed, picking her up. No, Emmy, you are the best. You gave me courage when I needed it most. Emily hugged him tightly. We did it together. David kissed her forehead. Yes, together. He looked around their small apartment, the modest home that had been witness to years of struggle, dreams deferred, and sleepless nights. And now it was the place where hope had grown stronger than fear, where perseverance had triumphed over doubt.